Syria. I hear some Israelis say to me, all of the people who cause trouble in the Middle East are busy killing each other. The extremist Sunnis are killing extremist Shiites. Well, there's no role for Israel. But what do you think? Would you agree with Prince Turki that some stepped-up program of assistance and training to the moderate opposition would be appropriate? And do you think the Israeli government would approve of that?
I 100% agree with every word the Prince have said on Syria. He described the situation in, his English is better than mine.
No.
When I walked in the fields, he was in Princeton. So,
but he can't fly a fighter airplane, I'll bet.
However, whining is not a policy for us. We need to do something. And he set one of the alternatives, is equipping the moderate opposition. Because Assad, unlike Mubarak, has a military that's willing to kill his own people. And this is a machine that is killing in the last 3 years 165,000 people, 10,000 kids, 6 million refugees, 1 million in Jordan, 1 million in Lebanon, 4 million or maybe 6 within Syria. It's a huge tragedy, a huge tragedy. And when I go to the previous questions about, having the P5 giving guarantees to somebody that he will not be killed, looking how the P5 is behaving. Mm-hmm. Because unlike Gaddafi, Assad is well protected by the Russians and the Chinese. So I will not take the guarantees so easily because sometimes I don't agree how to give the guarantees. So there are two possibilities here. One is to try and help the opposition, which there is a lot of concern in your country that the weapon will go to the extreme elements, to the jihadists. At the end of the day, it will be like Al-Qaeda that have started from you and the Saudis helping the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Not the Taliban, the Mujahideen.
The Mujahideen, absolutely right. Thank you for the correction. And this is a real danger. My alternative is a little bit different. It's saying that Assad's source of power should be neutralized from the outside. Imagine Assad wake up in the morning and these helicopters that are dropping explosive barrels on civilian population is not there the next morning because they were destroyed. Assuming the other morning he's waking up and his MiGs are gone. And this is not militarily...
Do you see any country volunteering, say a nearby neighboring state volunteering to do that?
I think there is a duty to protect the civilian population of Syria. And this principle of the duty to protect was created by the international community after Rwanda and after Srebrenica. We are 20 years after that. And the international community is not standing up to its obligation. Why NATO was created for? There is a huge, the largest military in NATO is northern of Syria. And the president of this country was very tough on Assad. Not the president, the prime minister. He's usually tough on everybody. So why he will not use his country with the help of a very good Air Force, excellent Air Force? The Americans should get away from their trauma on boots on the ground. I think if I were the advisor to the president, I will never recommend him to invade another country, to send troops on the ground. But the art of using strategic assets of a country, military power of a country, is to do it in a one-night operation. and solve a strategic problem in a tactical move. This can be done, and then you don't have to give anti-aircraft missile to the elements that may be transferring them to fire airliners in the future. So if I have to choose between these two alternatives, I will recommend changing the perception of Assad and the Iranians and Hezbollah that they are winning. And it can be done if there will be determination and professionalism of using air power, which I'm a big believer in.
That's powerfully said. I want to ask one more question of Prince Turki and then turn to the audience. Prince Turki, you lived through the period of another covert action program of training and assistance in Afghanistan. And on one level, that was very successful in driving the Soviet Union from Afghanistan. But as we saw, the problem of what's left over afterwards can become a nightmare. And we're still living with that nightmare. How can we prevent, we meaning the United States and its allies, other friends of Syria, prevent a situation where the support for the Syrian opposition becomes like what happened after support for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan? What are the ways to prevent that terrible thing from happening?
In Afghanistan, basically what the United States and Saudi Arabia and other countries should take credit. Pakistan takes credit as well. I think some European countries also provided help to the Mujahideen as well as the Egyptians at that time. We helped the Mujahideen parties that were fighting the Soviet army of occupation of Afghanistan and successfully drove them out of Afghanistan. And the clinching factor here was the provision of anti-aircraft missiles to elements of the Mujahideen that started bringing down Russian helicopters when they were in use and in operation. It was then, I think, that the Russian High Command finally managed to convince the leadership that they have to withdraw from Afghanistan, and they did. Now, after that, once the Soviets withdrew, the world forgot Afghanistan, basically, turned its back on Afghanistan. And that's when these elements that grew and became the nucleus of Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups filled the vacuum in Afghanistan. There was a civil war that started between the Mujahideen, famous Hikmat Yar and Ahmad Shah Massoud, were at loggerheads with each other, not using the weaponry that was given to them by the United States and Saudi Arabia, but using the weaponry that was left behind by the Soviet armies when they withdrew and gave it to the then communist government in Afghanistan, which the Mujahideen inherited and started fighting each other with that weaponry. And by leaving Afghanistan behind their backs, as I said, there was a vacuum. This is not to be repeated in Syria. Should the opposition succeed in Syria, the world community must come together and sustain the viability of the Syrian state. And the opposition is not offering to break down the present Syrian state as the Americans did in Iraq when they invaded Iraq and captured Saddam Hussein and destroyed his government. The opposition is saying we want to maintain the state of Syria, whether the armed forces, the secret police, the regular police, the government structure, etc., but we want to clear them from the bloodied hands of those who committed crimes. And this is the difference, I think, that will make us succeed in Syria, where the rest of the world, by neglecting Afghanistan and turning its back on Afghanistan, is still suffering from the consequences of that.
So I do want to turn to the audience now, and I'm going to make a shameful point of preference, which is to ask if there are journalists in the room. I know people's filing deadlines. I'd like to call on any journalists who have questions first, and then I'd be happy to call on others. And that gentleman there has his hand up, so I'm going to assume he fits my description. And could you identify yourself, please, and keep your question short, and in general, please keep your questions short. If people start making speeches, I'm going to, with
question mark at the end,
have to stop.
I'm Adrian Croft from Reuters News Agency, and I had a question for General Yadlin. Please, I'd like to take advantage of your intelligence background to ask you a question about the attack we saw in Brussels over the weekend. In view of the fact that the two Israelis who were killed were former government officials, and what seems to have been quite deliberate nature of the attack, as evidenced by the security video, do you think that this was a targeted killing, and would you point the finger at any particular organisation? And I also had a question, please, for Prince Turki, which is about the recent Saudi invitation to the Iranian foreign minister to visit Riyadh sometime soon. Does that indicate a possible thaw in relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, please?
General Yadlin.
Yes, I'm in the business of intelligence, but I'm not in the business of speculation. And I didn't see any current intelligence, so I will not speculate. What I'm reading in the news is what you're reading in the news, that it seems like a hate crime, and unless they will find the criminal who have done it, I don't have any more information.
Prince Turki.
This is not a recent invitation. When President Rouhani was elected as president of Iran, King Abdullah sent him a congratulatory note expressing the hope that relations between the two countries will improve, etc., etc. And then Mr. Zarif, I think back in February, expressed a desire to visit the kingdom, so our foreign minister invited him to come. Unfortunately, he did not take up that invitation. He visited the other Gulf states, Kuwait. I think he also visited Bahrain and Qatar, etc., but not Saudi Arabia. And it was Prince Saud responding to a question, perhaps it was from a Reuters journalist too, that what's happening with Iran, that Prince Saud mentioned that an invitation had been extended to Minister Zarif, but that he had not yet accepted to come to the kingdom. My time is getting short. Can we make questions brief?
Yes, and I promise we'll finish this
in
5 minutes. And
okay.
When somebody whose first name is Your Royal Highness says he has to catch a train, that's serious. This gentleman, and then Mark.
My name is Arif Mamadov. I am ambassador of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to the European Union. And my question is to your Royal Highness. You mentioned about the role that OIC can play as the second biggest international interstate organization with 57 member states. And in the light of the question that was before me on the improving of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the invitation, do you think that OIC and also Saudi Arabia will be chairing CFM meeting for the next year? Whether do you think that today OIC can play the role, taking into consideration that Iran is there are countries which have quite good normal economic relations with Israel, the countries with the different role. Do you think that OIC can, and also Secretary General of the OIC is prominent politician, former minister of Saudi Arabia. Do you think that now there is a role? And to
That's,
okay.
Let's stop with that question. I'm asked you to hold your answer and get Mark's question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Going back to Syria, and having had the chance to be in touch with the Syrian opposition for the last year, I've doubt very much the capable to conduct a transition. So the issue of giving them weapons makes it a very dangerous proposition. That's a comment. The question is, if you see what is happening now in Syria, what is happening in neighboring countries, do you see a prospect for borders being changed in the region in the long term? Not only Syria, but Iraq, other countries in transition? And where is the leadership to have a global view, a global strategy for stabilizing the region in general?
Good questions. OIC and end of the divisions of the region as we know them. Prince Turki?
Let me start by addressing the issue of borders. I think if borders are going to change within the area that you mentioned, it will be by outside powers, not by internal capabilities, despite the centrifugal forces that operate in countries like Iraq, for example. Potentially in Iran, too. They have centrifugal forces. But it would have to be, I think, from outside, someone coming in and supporting these centrifugal forces with whatever is necessary to change the borders. And I would respectfully disagree with you about providing defensive weapons to the opposition to shoot down these lethal machines of al-Assad. On the issue of the OIC already plays the role that you mentioned, not just between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but between all Muslim countries. And as Prince Saud mentioned in his response to that question about an invitation, we talk with the Iranians. We have an Iranian embassy in Tehran, and we have a Saudi embassy in Iran. So it's not a question of engaging with Iran. We are engaged with Iran. The thing is that we haven't yet succeeded in convincing the Iranian leadership that they have to change course. And I don't know if us not being able to convince them to do that, if the Secretary General of the OIC will be able to convince them of doing that. Because they're already members of the OIC and they know what they have to do.
I'm going to take two last questions and then turn to Amos Yadlin and Prince Turki for final comments. The lady in the second row and you, sir, here. Yes, ma'am. Do we have a microphone for the... Keep your questions brief, please, or Prince Turki will miss his train.
We don't want that to happen. Thank you very much. My name is Maretta Bild. I'm a former Danish diplomat. I have a naive question to both of you and a more serious one to Prince Turki. We started Israel-Palestine, and you said there's a current problem with current leadership. We expanded. We see there's a problem with strategic ideas. Where will we be? Who's leading what? Et cetera, et cetera. Do you believe there will be peace in your time between Israel and Palestine? My first naive question. Secondly, Prince Turki, it's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
I just wonder, why did Saudi Arabia have the urge to declare Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization lately? We didn't touch upon, at all upon Northern Africa, but there seems to be sort of a rollback of a certain popular uprising that happened 3 years ago and which admittedly had nothing to do with Palestine, Israel. I'm just wondering if you could clarify us a little bit about what is this, the strategy and the tactics on North Africa from the Saudis.
Save your answers to that. And the last question from the gentleman here in the fourth row.
Tim Eestmans, formerly a diplomat with the Dutch government. Very quick question to the general. You kind of dismissed the Middle East peace process as not the important issue in the Middle East. At the same time, you talk about Iran and its virulent hatred of Israel, which can be traced back to the way it treated the Palestinian people. Do you think that in the core, and also on the other side, the Al-Qaeda ones, the extremists on the Sunni side, they always bring this issue up. Do you think that in the core, when you go another level back, the Palestinian issue is the core issue in the Middle East?
So, Amos Yadlin, let me ask you to make your final comments in response to any of these questions or anything else you want to say by way of wrapping up.
Yeah, there is no one that wants to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict more than me. It is my kids and grandkids that live together with the Palestinians, If there will be no peace, there will be war, there will be bloodshed, and we want to solve it. However, it is not the core business in the Middle East. Look at the Middle East today and tell me what is the connection of the 65,000 people killed in Syria to the Israeli-Palestinian issue. What's the connection between the disintegration of Libya, Iraq, Syria, Yemen to the Israeli-Palestinian issue? What is the connection between the Ayatollah regime and its hostility to the Gulf area, to the Sunni world, its terrorism spreading in the Middle East, his helping to Bashar to slaughter his people, to the issue of the Israeli and the Palestinian issue. It is an important issue to solve, especially for Israelis, especially for Palestinians, and may the rest of the world pay more attention to a more acute issues. And we will solve it. We have no choice. See, they say that a pessimist is an optimist with experience. I do, unfortunately, have an experience. Served 40 years in the IDF. Flying airplane was the enjoyable part
Very
of it.
destructive too.
Being chief of intelligence for 5 years was a tough one. And then I'm like, the prince is now running a think tank. So with all my experience, I believe that at the end of the day, we will reach peace. You Europeans should look at yourself. For 1,000 years, you have killed each other in all the methods in the world. Catholics against Protestant, Germans against France, Brits against whoever, and 2 awful wars in the last decade. And look at you today. You embrace each other. You don't want to go to any military activity. So if you have achieved it, the Arabs and the Israelis are sometimes even have more interest to achieve it, not to say that we have more experience. So I do believe that there will be peace. It's tough, you need leadership, but it's possible, and it's essential.
Your Highness.
Yes, on the question of the Muslim Brotherhood, Saudi Arabia did not take that decision whimsically or simply to appear to be supporting the Egyptian government because it declared the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. There was a very deep and thorough study of the activities of the Muslim Brotherhood in the kingdom, and not just outside the kingdom, which led to their being identified as a terrorist organization. I hope that answers your question. There was another question as well, wasn't there?
Peace. Are you believing that there will be peace one day?
Hmm?
Are you believing that there will be peace one day?
In my lifetime, I hope so. I'm getting on in age, and it's not. But I hope definitely in my children's lifetime and their lifetime. And I always tell the young people that, look, my generation, whatever we may think of ourselves, we're going to leave you a world much worse than we inherited from our parents. Whether it is nuclear weapons, whether it is terrorism, whether it is Syria, whether it is Iraq, whether it is whatever. So I hope that you will be more successful than we when you leave your world for your children. One last thing I would like to refer back to the General's invitation for me to go to Jerusalem. I have a selfish reason for wanting the Arab Peace Initiative to succeed. And that is to fulfill the wish of my late father before he died, to pray again in the mosque in Jerusalem. Not being able to do that impinges on my sensibilities. That here I am in the Arab world, here's Jerusalem, the first Qibla, the first direction where Muslims prayed to before then God told them to pray to Mecca, and I can't go there. So that is a selfish wish on my part. And if the Arab Peace Initiative is implemented, that will allow me to take a plane from Riyadh to Jerusalem, go to the mosque, pray there, and perhaps from there visit the tombs of the other prophets that we believe in, Abraham, Moses, whatever. All the biblical prophets are our prophets as well. And I would love to go to the site of Hittin. Any Arabs or Muslims here would know that site. That's when Saladin defeated the Crusader armies and eventually drove them out of Jerusalem, where they had come in before and massacred everybody, not only Muslims and Jews, but also Christians that were in Jerusalem were massacred by the Crusaders. And I would love to go and visit that site and see how Saladin perhaps thought and did about that. I'd also like to taste fresh Java oranges. They figure prominently in Arab literature. I don't know if any of you have read Arab literature from the Middle Ages or not, but Jaffa oranges were always considered to be the best oranges in the area. So these are selfish reasons that I have for the Arab Peace Initiative to succeed. And I hope people like General Yadlin will come around to feeling that it is the way to go forward. Thank you, David, for
So we all want to work on Prince Turki's travel plans. I want to just, on behalf of myself and also GMF, thank two remarkably courageous and wise people. These two have done something really special today. I think we all know it. And so I ask you to join me in thanking them.
Thank you.
And if I could, maybe just to add an additional word of thanks to close. Our thanks to the speakers, of course, but also, David, our thanks to you for bringing this together, for being with us, for your moderation. My thanks to all of our GMF staff in Brussels who worked very, very hard on this. We're really grateful. And above all, thanks to all of you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again at a GMF event. Thank you.